So welcome to I Technologies Presents National Distance Learning Week 2019, Remaining in Rhythm Through Blended Experiences. So happy National Distance Learning Week. Hopefully you've already started doing some activities this week. Like I just mentioned, we want this to be interactive and engaging throughout. So we have the chat box there for you to be able to chat any kind of comments or feedback that you might have throughout the presentation, any questions that you might have. Go ahead and throw those in there. Roxanne and I are collaborating on this session, and we'll be kind of bouncing back and forth between leading the presentation and kind of watching that chat. So go ahead and throw things in there throughout. For those of you that I haven't met before, like my new friend Tammy, my name's Ken Kahn. I am the Director of Partnerships and Collaboration here with I Technologies. I've been doing some form of distance learning now since right around 2002. At that point, I was a sixth grade classroom teacher. I was a still fairly young teacher at that point, but had kind of fallen into all this instructional technology stuff. And one day, all of this equipment showed up into the building that I was in, and that started my journey getting involved with distance learning, particularly interactive video conferencing. And I went to my first Texas Distance Learning Association conference in 2003 with my school district at that time because it was new across our school district. And I got a directive from our technology director. He said, I want you to get more involved with that organization. And 2 years later, I was elected president-elect of the Texas Distance Learning Association. So I can't be stubborn, but I can take direction as well. So yeah, that started my journey with Texas Distance Learning Association. I am a past president. I helped plan the 2006 conference, which was in San Antonio, which it's hard for me to believe that, we're well over 10 years of that happening now. So I spent some time with Texas DLA and then got involved with the USDLA as my presidency was ending with Texas DLA. I became involved with the United States Distance Learning Association, which is also a big proponent of National Distance Learning Week. They're doing several things this week as well. And I started with their state chapter program and helped develop the different state chapters and support the state chapters of the United States Distance Learning Association, and then I just finished up my term as United States Distance Learning Association president. Last year, I was in my third year of that as board chair. And so now I get to really focus on my time here with I Technologies and doing what I love, which is focusing on, creating partnerships and connecting people in collaboration. And my colleague, Roxanne.
Hi, thanks, Ken. I'm Roxanne Glauser. I'm Director of Marketing and Learning for I Technologies. And I also want to welcome you to National Distance Learning Week. My journey into distance learning, as Ken and I were reviewing and prepping for the session, mine began in 2000. I got my master's in learning technologies from Pepperdine, and I was in the third cadre of their online master's degree program. And so if you just think about the technologies that we had in 2000, those of you that can remember back to 2000, it really, one of the biggest takeaways that I learned during that program was it really is about the people and the intentions, and the technologies will change. And now that's what we're so excited to be sharing with you today, kind of our experiences through that evolution. I've been involved with TXDLA, actually Ken's conference that year. We had just met and he convinced me to be his awards committee chair. And so I did that. And then through the years have consistently been involved with the TXDLA and served as conference co-chair a couple of years ago. So always looking for ways to promote relationships and connections throughout the distance learning community. So and right now at I Technologies, I am in charge of all of our marketing and work with Ken closely on that, and also any of the learning that takes place. So sometimes we're working with customers that are new to the technology, others that are seasoned, that are evolving into the next generation of video conferencing and video communication. So with that, I love this image, this is I2I Technologies. We are first and foremost focused on video communications. We believe in the power of seeing and hearing. So as one of the kind of core missions for I2I Technologies, we continue to focus on developing trusted partnerships, because as the technology continues to evolve, we found that people that we work with really are looking for someone who has the depth and breadth of knowledge that can help guide them as video becomes even more important to organizations and educational institutions. Everything we do has to be simple, flexible, and dependable. And the more everything evolves in the world, we believe that it comes down to how can we most effectively communicate. So those are some of our core principles here at I2I Technologies.
And quite often, people ask me, what do you do, right? And so industry people, if we say, oh, I do video communication and collaboration, oh, cool, you get it. But then when you get people that, I meet maybe at church or through different things, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I do video communication and collaboration, you get that like, okay. So this really gives an idea of exactly who is I2I Technologies, like what do we actually do? And it shows our different solutions and services that we provide. So we kind of focus on 3 different types of solutions. Obviously, video conferencing is at that core. It's that video communication and collaboration because we believe in that interactive piece, but not just the synchronous part too. We also believe in asynchronous stuff. So that might come through content distribution, maybe through some digital signage or recorded videos. Maybe it's through integrated room systems, right? So a room that maybe has like a control system in it that has maybe audio and video conferencing or interactive video is some aspect of that. And we'll also help people with virtual event support. And you see the consulting on there, and that kind of connects to that very first part of our circle of services, because it's conversational consulting. We really believe in sitting down and talking to people about, what is it that you're trying to do? And, we're really going to be digging into that today with our blended process as well, but kind of having that conversation and then helping people with design if they need it, installation and configuration, implementation and support, or ongoing maintenance. So that's just a little bit about more of who we are and what we do.
And this slide was, this is a sketch note from our presentation that we did last year for TXDLA and USDLA. And so today's session is building on the last part of that. So the first part that we talked about, spent a lot of time last year talking about the types of human interactions, and this really resonated with people. This is not a continuum. It's just there are so many ways to communicate now. And one of the elements that we believe helps to make it effective is to connect with that voice, that human behind it. And the second point that we looked at were how we can improve our lives and build community through time and distance with the different tools that are evolving in the modern educational and modern workplace. And then finally, we really laid out that blended process. So if you're interested in the full session, we do have it available on demand, and we'll drop a link in the follow-up of this session to where if you want to see the original, you can. But now for this session, we are going to be looking more at that blended process.
Yeah, so when Roxanne and I were talking about like what should we focus on here for National Distance Learning Week, what do we want it to do? And we, that last session we did at TXDLA and USDLA, it not only resonated with us, we felt like it resonated with the audience. We really enjoyed the conversation and the interaction we were having. And so it was like, you know what, maybe we should just really dig a little bit further into a piece of that, right? And a large piece of that is this blended process. And when we talk about our blended process, we're really thinking about that, combination of goals and resources. And from a distance learning perspective, we're also thinking about it from a synchronous and asynchronous perspective, right? When is it most appropriate for us to get together and do things at the same time versus, when's it better for us to kind of like, divide some tasks, work on some things, and then come back together. And so this is the process that that we developed. I was joking with Roxanne that we should have a little trademark on there. We should go ahead and trademark this because this is something that we just kind of sat down and kind of came out of a conversation that Roxanne and I had as we were planning that last presentation. But it kind of starts with that first part there of setting your intention, right? So we feel very strongly that before you start working on any of the other details, before you start running out the door, really kind of setting out, okay, what are we doing here? You know, what's our purpose? You know, what are our goals? What do we really want to do? Because often I feel like people start being like, okay, well, we got this, and it's like, hold on a minute. We're not even on the same page of exactly what are we trying to do here. So let's make sure we're all have the same intention of what we're trying to do, and we're all in agreement on that. And then that next step is take an inventory of the resources. Okay, so it's like, okay, this is our intention. You know, what do we have available for us to help do that intention? What do we have available to help us meet those goals that we've set out? And then that next part is, okay, now what are the circumstances, the environment? You know, these are the things that we have available. What are the circumstances? You know, do we have people dispersed? You know, is everybody in the same location? You know, I always think of like that Apollo 13 movie for this part, right? When they get stuck up in space, these guys are up in space, right? And it's like, okay, our intention here is let's get these guys home safely, right? Here are the resources that we have available. These are the circumstances, and they dump that stuff out on the table, and they're like, okay, what do we do here? You know, this is what we have to work with. And then that takes us to that make a plan, okay? So here's our intention. Here's the resources we have available. Here are the circumstances. What's the best plan that we can come up with based on all of those things? And then not to be undermined, because often some people get into this aspect too quickly, but you also have to do something and take action. Because what sometimes happens is like, well, you know, things aren't perfect, right? Very rarely does everything line up exactly how you want to. And especially if you have a big group of people, right? Very rarely do you get the whole group of people to agree. So it's kind of like, okay, you know, I'm not feeling exactly great about this or this, but let's see how it works out. Let's do this and review it as we're doing it and kind of adjust in real time. And so we kind of have this in a circle because these things are kind of happening, you know, once you get the process started, you're constantly flowing between them because maybe the circumstances have changed as you're executing. Maybe you've gained or lost a resource. But the most important thing is as you're making changes, focusing back on that intention. Like, okay, we're changing this, but is it still true to our intention? Has our intention changed a little bit? Maybe something else got covered where we're like, we thought we were just going to do this, but let's tack this on too because it's related or it helps us achieve some of those goals that we're doing.
Okay, so to dive into that, we are very practical. So what we want to do is we're going to take two examples and actually walk you through the elements of what it looks like at each of those stages in the process. So the first example we have is a historical park. And this one, I always want to go visit. Every time I see the pictures of it, I'm like, okay, I need to make a trip. So this one will be, Ken will share his experiences working with and designing the solution for this historical park. And then I'm going to take over and I'll share our experiences as we've implemented Microsoft Teams internally and kind of some lessons learned through that process. So Ken, we are ready for your first example.
Sure. Yeah, and so this is exciting for me because this is actually a project that we worked on a little bit ago, and it's up there probably in my top 5 projects of all time. And, you know, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, right? So that is saying something. This has been a very unique, special opportunity. And so it's an opportunity that we got to do with the University of Nebraska State Museum, and in particularly with one of their affiliate museums, which is the Ashfall Fossil Bed State Historical Park. So they came to us, and again, they've been just an incredible partner because there's a person there, her name's Annie, who is just a delight, right? It's just one of those people like you just jive with. You know, we have very similar personalities, we can just nerd out together about how cool video is and like cool stuff that we can do with it, which, it's not easy to find those types of people. So they came to us and they said, okay, here's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to develop kind of a first-person video field trip at our Ashfall Fossil Bed State Historical Park Museum, and we want it to go to different areas. So their intention was to conduct a virtual field trip from kind of like an outdoor-ish barn area. It kind of covers their fossil dig site. I'll be showing you some pictures of that. And then they have like separate buildings, so they were going to have to go between that building and another building. And they also, part of their intention was they wanted to have access to the parent museum. So they call it the Morrill Hall is the name of the University of Nebraska State Museum parent museum. That's kind of where most of their programming and most of their stuff originates. So they wanted to have the ability to maybe host a presentation there, but use some of the resources and content at the museum. And you see right in the middle of the slide there, for their virtual field trip program, that's the goal that they came in. That's the goal that they had developed for themselves. So they came to this project with is they're like, our goal is we want to give our audience the view and feel of our collections as much as possible. So like, if they can't be here physically, we want it to be as close to that as we can possibly give them. So right away when we saw this, we're like, okay, we're pretty intrigued with this. So it's like, okay, well, what do you got? What are your resources? What do you have? And so basically they're like, okay, well, traditionally we've been doing this at Morrill Hall, right? We have some, traditional video conferencing carts and systems that we use, and we'll kind of set them up in the different areas of our galleries and present. You can see they even we're very conscious, they have headset, because they're out in that gallery area. And then they're like, and also in addition to using these traditional video conferencing systems, we're also doing a lot of stuff through Zoom to bring in the participants from around the state in Nebraska to be able to attend our different virtual field trip programs. So those were really the only resources they were coming to us with, okay? So now let's get to this part, which is the circumstances of the environment. And this is where it gets a little bit crazy. And I think most people might kind of would have turned tail and run away. So this gives you an idea of the map. So this is the image of the Ashfall Fossil Bed State Historical Park sky view image. So you can see that, you got that visitor center up there. And then you can see the fossil bed barn way down below, which is where they wanted to originate the majority of the programming, but they also wanted the ability to do programming from the visitor center as well. And remember, that other part is they also wanted the ability to bring in the parent museum to do different things. That was all part of their intention. So they sent this, and it's like, okay. And then we start digging into it a little bit further. So then it's like, okay, well, and I kind of labeled this circumstances like everything in the kitchen sink. All right. So I'm going to kind of read through these with you. Okay. Not to bore everybody with some reading, but I think this is important to be read. So 3 buildings. All right. So they desired portability. One is that barn. You can see that barn. This is the path down from that visitors museum to the barn. They said the temperature range is there between 45 to 105 degrees, depending on the time of year, right? Because it's basically just covered. Incline from the barn to the museum. So they're kind of going down an incline, going down a hill. And they were saying most likely this whatever solution we came up with them, that's going to be stored up in the museum building. So you're going to have to move it back and forth. They're not going to want to keep it in that barn area. Poor lighting. There's poor lighting in the barn. I'll be showing you some pictures. You'll get a really good idea. So they're like, okay, and there's poor lighting in here. And the fossils that we want to show, they're kind of encased in this white sediment. So that doesn't help with poor lighting. You got some just washed out white stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, also it's windy and dusty in there too. So, the equipment's probably not going to, like that very much, right? We want it to be easily set up by one person. We don't have a lot of staff out there. We don't have a lot of storage space. So, this can't be too big. We use Macs, so we would rather things be Mac-based. We want the ability to walk, talk, and hear 10 to 20 feet away from this solution. We want to be able to see the far sites. We want the ability to utilize PowerPoint, maybe Google Maps, video, other visual medium, basically anything we kind of come up with, we want to be able to use within this virtual field trip. Also, we want multiple types of video connections. So we want people that have traditional video conferencing cards to connect, people that are using Zoom to connect, maybe Skype, any other cloud-based application. We want them to have the ability to connect to us. And, it needs to be hardwired, but we're also going to use Wi-Fi. Like in the barn area, we're going to use Wi-Fi. So hardwired or Wi-Fi, we want to have the choice to do either one. And virtual field trips, may occur while other people are there. So there might be a lot of people around us while we're actually doing these virtual field trips. All right. So that's a mouthful, right? So just to give you an idea too, so this is the barn area. So you can kind of see what we're facing here. You can see kind of the lighting, right? It's kind of basically just this is like a natural fossil bed that was found, and they basically just covered it up. They do archaeological research stuff there and bring people through. There's another shot, a little bit brighter. We're getting a lot more light there. You can kind of see some of the fossils there. Here's a shot that probably gives you a more accurate idea of when they said the lighting challenges, because you can see like kind of half of it's just not getting that natural daylight at the time, where the other half is. So it's like they kind of have this fossil bed and they have this area all around it there. So the plan, right? So, so basically we met with them, my colleague Scott Richardson and I. He's one of our solution architects. And, so of course, we meet with them. Okay, yeah, we're taking all in. Okay, we're asking a lot of questions. We're getting all this information. Andy was great and detailed a lot of this stuff out too for us and kind of sent it to us. And so I meet with Scott, and I hope some of you get to meet Scott someday, because he's a very interesting fellow. So on the call, he's very pleasant and, yeah, this is going to be great. And then I meet with Scott, and he's like, "You're crazy. Why? How did you get us involved in this? We're not going to be able. Do you hear what they're asking us to do? It's like everything's contradicting everything." And so, in our mind, we were thinking traditional video conferencing cart, right? That's normally what we do, and that's kind of what they came to it with as well, right? So everybody's coming to it with this idea of, we need to do a traditional video conferencing cart, knowing that the circumstances aren't matching that. It's not going to work, right? But that's what we know. But it's like, it's not going to work. So what do we do? And so Scott and I just kind of walked through each one of those things, right? We kept very focused on, okay, here's their intention. They want to do a virtual field trip. All right. They want it to be first person. We took all those things into consideration. We're thinking, okay, they're going to have to move this, and out of that developed this new, I would call it a next generation mobile video conference solution. And we focused it around anything that you would use on a computer. So we had the cart. So we're like, okay, let's keep the cart. Let's keep the display. And we ended up doing a 40-inch display on it, because remember, one of their requirements, they want to be able to be far away from it and be able to see it. We put a PTZ camera. So that's kind of the pan, tilt, zoom. That's kind of that nice camera on it. But it's a USB camera, because what we ended up doing, instead of doing a traditional video conferencing codec, we used a Microsoft Surface Pro. And, some people might be like, well, what about an iPad and everything? The thing we liked about the Surface Pro was it basically operates like an iPad, a tablet, but it has that laptop part to it as well. So we can do a full-based video conferencing client on it, versus if you're using an app, sometimes you just don't get all the features on an app that you do on something that you can download on a computer. And we're like, hey, let's do this. It allows them to use what they're doing today, which they talked about. We're using Zoom today, but we're like, hey, look, whatever application you go to, like if somebody comes to you next month and says, hey, Zoom's out the window, we're going to use Microsoft Teams going forward. Okay, cart, we still use this cart, right? No change. We just, instead of opening up the Zoom application, we open up Microsoft Teams application. Or somebody walks in and says, hey, we want to start using LifeSize. Okay, download the LifeSize application on the Microsoft Surface Pro. Everything else still stays the same. So that's the solution that we came to them with. And then so we go to our next step, which is the do and review. I got a lot of cool pictures here to show you on this part. So there you can see my buddy Scott, he's there on site. You got to love this little picture of him with that little knit cap on, right? Doesn't he look cute in that picture? So there's Scott kind of putting the cart together on site there. The guy next to him in the picture on the left is Rick. He's the superintendent of the historical park there. So that's them kind of putting it together, and Scott kind of showing them how it is going to work. And then this is the first, they did a dry run through. So this was like a couple weeks later, we did a dry run through rough program with them where they actually did a presentation of what they were going to do, because the park is actually closed from about, I think it's closed from about beginning of November all the way through April every year because of the weather there. So they're really only open from May to October. So we did a rough program with them. You can see there's the speaker view. So there's our presenter. She's wearing a little headset. We had a Bluetooth headset that was part of this. And that thing was fabulous, by the way. If somebody was standing next to her talking, we could kind of hear a muffled thing, but we couldn't hear it. So it's when they have an audience of people around them, if they have people visiting the park at the same time they're doing a virtual field trip, you can't hear anybody but the speaker. So there's the speaker view. You can see her standing right on the edge outside the fossil bed. This is an example of the content sharing. Remember, that was important to them. So she was able to share a slide showing a map of, where the fossil beds were located and everything. You do the content sharing. This is her in the fossil pit. So this is still coming from the camera on the cart, kind of out there off, behind the railing. And this is the presenter out in the pit. And, she's wearing the headset, so she's able to hear everything, and we're able to hear her through the mic that she's wearing. And then, we have that 40-inch TV, so she's able to see everybody on that TV, even though she's, 20 feet away from it. This is another shot of that USB camera. I included that in there because this is where they kind of zoomed it in on an area. And you can just see that detail. Remember that lighting when we were seeing that just generic, somebody took a photograph of it. It's you kind of tell it was a fossil bed, but you don't see that. I mean, that detail is just crazy. You can see some of our teams on there too. There's Roxanne. That is me. That's just, when I, actually trimmed my beard, it looks a little bit different there. And so this is another shot, just a zoomed in shot of her, showing if she was kind of showing the students how they would actually dig on the site there. This is one right from the Surface Pro. So this is where they could actually take that Surface Pro off into the fossil bed. And you see that, I don't know if you noticed, there's a little green dot. That's them using a light laser pen pointer. So then they could go first person right into the fossil pit you're standing there. Here's a good image. So these are some images. So this is actually the very first one that they did. I believe it's the first one. It's definitely in the beginning because this is from May of that following year when they started doing the programs. And you can see some of their different educators and even Rick there, the superintendent. The funny thing about Rick is he was not a technology guy, right? So from the get-go, he was already kind of okay, I'm on board with the intention of this, not so much excited about the technology part. And there he is, with the headset on, using the Surface Pro in the fossil pit, giving people that, that's what they're seeing, right? It's just like you're there. So you can see they're using it in all different formats there. And right within the program, we designed it so they could take it off. So this is one of those scenarios where, we got that blended process. Here, I'll flip it to that slide before I throw it back to Roxanne. We have that blended process where it's every step of the way we were really conscious of it and carrying it out, and just, it's one of those situations where everything lines up, from the people that we're working with to how things turn out. It's one of those things where we always have high expectations for ourselves, and this even exceeded the high expectations. So it was an incredible opportunity to work with. So I'll turn it to Roxanne for our other example. Oh, and I have to release that.
There we go. Okay, so before I get started, let me double check. Looks like we are All right, so Ken, looks like I'm good. All right, thank you, thank you. Let me get my one other little window up there. All right, so thanks, Ken, for that sharing that example. That is, I always love. Well, actually, I always tell the story of when I first came to interactive video conferencing and distance learning. I thought it would be um, pretty much inferior to that going there, and I wanted to go to every place. So anytime I see something where they're using it in such a way like this to really bring those experiences to students, it's so amazing. I'm always like, okay, I love seeing that. So now as we transition, as I shared, I got started in distance learning, video conferencing. And at the time when I started with video conferencing, it was a single application. So we would just video conference, and we were always wanting other tools to help make that a richer experience. As I worked on my master's at Pepperdine, we did everything asynchronously except for we did have synchronous meetings, but they were in basically a chat tool at the time was the only thing we had for synchronous, and it was ASCII characters, so it was not images. So compared to what we have now in modern educational platforms and our modern workplaces, it's mind-blowing, the difference. So again, taking you through this blended process, I want to share with you our experiences. And I've been talking to lots of people are looking at using some type of a unified communications tool. Two of the ones that we hear a lot of people using, Microsoft Teams and Slack. And so we really looked at how we use that process, and I'm going to just walk you through. This is how our experience with using Microsoft Teams. The beginning of it is, as Ken mentioned, is to set your intention. So and our journey into Teams was that internally we were drowning in internal email. We had so much email coming in. We wanted to have conversations, our asynchronous conversations, and we realized that email wasn't working for it. We did have some chat tools, but to chat, it was still creating a fragmented style of communication to where you're like, oh, did you email that to me? Did you text it to me? Is it in chat? Where is it? So the communication was not efficient. So we began having that conversation of we need a better way to share files, a better way to communicate. They need to be accessible through any device. And so we were like, what would it be? And so we had this, we knew we had a need, and we knew what we wanted to do. It really was around that decreasing internal email and better collaboration. So we began with our inventory of resources. And this one for us internally, we're Office 365 customer. We do have access to Life-Size Cloud. So those were our two main resources that we had. And then we realized through our Office subscription, we also had access to a product called Teams. And we really dove into it about a year and a half ago. So we already had that. We also knew that part of the intention or part of what we wanted was we wanted to be an enterprise solution. So that eliminated at the time, and what we had access to was Google Docs. So we wanted something that worked with what we already invested in the enterprise. And this was a big one for us because a lot of times, and what I'm describing for you here is exactly the process we work with customers, because they'll come to us with a intention, and we really want to look at what do you already have? Do you have something within your environment that can do that? Maybe you have a subscription and you're only using a bit of it. And so that was what we discovered in our Office 365 solution. So we were kind of challenged to use some of the tools that we were already paying for. What would that look like? And so we looked at them in the circumstances of our environment. So for our organization, we have a main office in Plano, a physical location where we can do all of our testing and staging have some office meeting spaces there. So we do have that, but we also have a need for it to be remotely accessible and to be flexible. So with that, some of the elements that we looked for in the environment is that the files or whatever communication we were doing, it had to be accessible through through mobile devices, which are sometimes different. So we didn't always want to have to get out the laptop to do it. Can I do it from a tablet? Can I do it from a phone? So that flexibility was key for us, because just with our team, we're starting to see an increase in need for that flexibility, to where if you do have a sick family member that you need to care for and you still have tasks and responsibilities, how can we use the technology to help that be possible? And then as more of our team is traveling, we really wanted to be efficient in our communication to get our tasks done. And really all we needed even to add in video was a pretty decent, over 4G or stable internet connection. And for us internally, this was a huge change in circumstance from just 4 or 5 years ago. We are, pretty much have always, and we're an audiovisual company, but it was at the when cloud video conferencing really grew, and when LifeSize actually released the LifeSize Cloud product, that we were able to transition from having to get to the conference room to where now it's really you have it with you wherever you are. If I have the camera and a connection, I can be on a call. So this was kind of our circumstances of our environment. And so through this, we've also noticed realized some benefits of cost reduction in physical locations as well. So that's been a nice thing that has come along this journey. So that definitely reviewing our inventory and our resources and the circumstances of the environment. And so then we came to a plan. What we realized as we were kind of evaluating our resources or taking the inventory of them, we realized that this would be best piloted in a couple of specific instances. Because one of what we've discovered, and even working with clients and working with our partners, is that if you just get into demo it and you're like, oh, it does this, it does this, it does this, you really don't find the kind of the bumps along the way. So we wanted to find the bumps before we said, hey, we're going to use this for everything. So for our testing, we did a small pilot with some very specific marketing activities that we were collaborating on, and some very specific sales activities. Now we did a marketing and a sales pilot, and we just kind of hopped in. We were like, here, we did some foundational learning together. And we knew that as we got into it, there were some pain points that we already had in our existing processes and procedures. So we made sure to communicate those to the team so that we could evaluate the product in relation to those. So for instance, one of our challenges that we noticed at the sales pilot was the photo files. We needed to be able to share those and have them open in a certain way. So we did kind of mention that as we were developing the plan of how we would upload them and how we would share those. So that was a very specific instance of that. In the marketing, as we went into the plan, one of our great needs there had to do with document revisions as we were going to production. So if we're working on a document, so we wanted to be able to easily have everyone that's reviewing it have the most current version of it, and also to be able to have the conversation in context. So as we developed our plan, those were elements that were definitely in the forefront. And so then we get to the do and the review section of it. And this one, Ken and I have had conversations going back and forth. I'm like, well, you do it, then you review it. And in this instance, it was so much more fluid than that. So what we did find in our doing and our reviewing is sometimes we would have to have the conversation of how we're going to collaborate a little bit before we actually would start the content of that meeting. And so that process goes back to the having that team communication. You can't assume when you are working collaboratively that, oh, I'm doing it this way, it's super easy for me. But if it caused work for your teammates, extra work for them, you need to have a venue and have that conversation of, oh, is this the best way to do it? Because one of the things that we've discovered in Microsoft Teams, much like any Microsoft product that you have interacted with, there are about 15 ways to do any task. So you can make your keyboard shortcut people happy. You can have, oh, I like to go to the menus and do this. Oh, I'm a right click kind of person. All of that, they bring that philosophy into Teams as well. So just a very specific example happened this week was the way I was linking a file. I was linking it. I do a lot of web stuff, and so I have a certain way that I link files. Well, in Teams, I was doing that, and it literally was taking Ken. I was causing him like 15 extra clicks to just open and view the file by the way I was like linking it. And so when we started our meeting, he was like, let me show you what this looks like for me. And once he showed me his process, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so annoying. So I'm like, okay, how's another way to do that? And so we really came to that, just a clear understanding of, oh, if you insert it here and the file's placed here, we can get a cleaner, easier link for everyone, no matter if you're coming to it from a browser, from the desktop app, from mobile. So that as you move into these modern collaboration, video communication and collaboration solutions, that conversation is going to be critical because they are very fluid, very open-ended. And so if you don't have like some boundaries or some conversation, yeah, it's easy just to put things and not really understand where they are. So we've been a little more conscious of that. So that has been, that was kind of a challenge and ended up being a strength because one of what we discovered in using Teams was that it sped up our development time as we are working on so many different tasks and projects because we can have our inbox doesn't have all the internal email conversation. So that is placed in Teams and it has context. So whether we are chatting about it, whether we have a conversation in that channel, whether anything that we have related, we know it's searchable within Teams. Much easier to find and to get back on task. One of the things that we discovered that was kind of a shift for us was it does have a built-in wiki. And we discovered when we first started using it, it's not searchable. So we were like, that makes no sense. So we'd have our little arguing of like, okay, why did they do it this way? You kind of accept it and move on because that's the other thing of as we move into using these modern distance learning tools or any type of software-based product, you don't get too attached to, well, it doesn't do it or frustrated with it or even deep of let me understand the nuts and bolts of every little piece of it because it's software. They're going to do an update and hey, guess what? It might be something that you're like, oh, that was a total pain last week and then poof, there's a software update and hey, guess what? Easy peasy this week. So that has been one of the biggest things that we've learned. And then just to kind of really kind of say, okay, how is this going to work? Lean into it and operate in that new workflow. We did have some challenges. The photo files were one that really we couldn't get it to work the way we were wanting it to, and we wanted it, there were some elements of it to originate from the phone directly into certain folders to be able to share it in. So there were some challenges there. We're just going to keep an eye on it because, like I said, when you look at there's a place where you can go online and put in feature requests. And, that's kind of how they develop their roadmap from it. If I see it's, a big need for other people, odds are it will eventually come to be. So there are lots of new features, some really key ones that we were looking for, some tighter integration with tasks and Planner, even some tighter integration with Outlook now is going to be coming to Teams. So we're really interested in that. It does we hop over when we need the video collaboration has been really nice. One of the features that we found that we've really enjoyed is the integration when you have your meeting within the channel. There's a place where you can create your meeting notes right within it, so it ties the notes to that. One of the other things that we've been noticing this last week is when you are in Teams and you share a PowerPoint, like as we were collaborating on this one actually for this session, and I would share it. As you come out of it, they're saying, hey, we noticed you were presenting this. Would you like to automatically share it to the team? So that is really powerful, and that is leading us into what we're seeing is that kind of next stage of the AI integration into our communication tools. And it's kind of scary, but it's kind of exciting too, to where they're trying to eliminate the distance, to where no matter where you are with that connection, that you'll be able to communicate and collaborate. So that's a little bit of our journey. And this is, I don't have all the cool pictures like Ken had, but this is literally what we look like. This is, before we got into the content, what we're doing in this picture is we're trying to figure out what's going on with the cameras, because there was a setting or somebody's cameras, I think Ken's was trying to frame him in the middle. And so it was putting him in the middle, but the way Teams was laying out the video, he was cut off on the side. And so, yeah, so it took us a while, and we were, as Ken mentioned before, this was a complete geek out over the technology when we're trying to be like, well, what is it doing there? You know, those auto moving cameras that everyone wants. Well, you're like, well, yeah, your camera can do that, but then if your video layout and the software is just laying it out in certain ways, it can be beyond your control there. So that was, and then we did have quite a conversation of that hovering toolbar that was annoying to us. We just had to come to acceptance and move on from that. So that was a little bit of our journey into Microsoft Teams. I presented it in a linear form. It was not. So I just want to remind everyone that as you move through that blended process, it's a process and it's ongoing. So that after you do and review and you make those changes, you always want to revisit, are we still honoring our intention, or is our intention shifted? Do we have any changes in any of those elements? So that's what keeps you kind of on course and moving forward. So we wanted to share both of these examples with you, because one is really the innovative in just the video conferencing solution that Ken shared, and then also kind of as we move forward in helping people with video communication, there's all kinds of communication tools that are out there now. So I'm going to turn it back to Ken as we begin to wrap up.
Yeah, so hopefully that gives you a picture of some of the ways that we help people, because people ask, like, what makes you guys so different? There are people out there that also do video communication and collaboration, right? It's like, what makes us different is we're not just out there telling people that they should use it. We're using it too. I mean, we practice what we preach. What's the friendly way of saying that? We drink our own champagne, right? I know there's other not so nice ways to say that, but we drink our own champagne and we practice what we preach. We really believe in it. As a throwback to the title of our last presentation on the quality of life, we feel like it improves the quality of our life, and it does help us build community, not just with people outside of I2I Technologies and some of you guys, but it really does help us build community within our group. Just a couple weeks ago, we just did, we had a team meeting. We have a monthly all hands team meeting where we all get together and kind of hear from our big cheese, Chris, about things that are going on with the company, and then just to talk about other aspects. And it was right when those tornadoes came through the Dallas area. And one of our team members, Willis, for those of you that have met Willis, know Willis, he was helping, his brother was right in the middle of that. His house was one of the houses that got affected. So he was out helping his brother that day, and paused what he was doing there to connect into the meeting. He just grabbed his phone and jumped on. He had LTE service out there, which is surprising considering all the people that were out there using mobile stuff. But he jumped on his phone and, met with us, and that kind of gave us a bird's eye view of what was going on there. And it was just like, wow, crazy. So, those are the types of things that we like to help people with, right? Like we're very agnostic to whatever video communication platform people use, right? We just want to help adjust things for people to make them simple and dependable. We want them to work for you. When you walk into a room, just like you flip on a light switch, we want you to feel that way about whatever solution you're going to use. And I'll be like, is today the video going to work or not? It's like you should be able to walk in and know, yep, we're doing this today. We're meeting. Let's just carry on. Let's do this, and let's jump on to the next thing. We do that through different innovative solutions. Like we talked about the mobile video conferencing solution we put together for Ashfall. We'll come in and help people improve through, some type of implementation support. Maybe it's a technical issue, or maybe it's just a training issue, right? Maybe it's just like helping people figure out the process, a better way for them to use the resources that they have in relationship to the circumstances of the environment. Because one of the things that we didn't talk much about here is sometimes the circumstances of the environment are people oriented, right? It's Craig, the short fuse guy, or Betty, who likes to just talk about personal things all the time, right? So it's like sometimes it's working through the personal or the people part of it within that process. And, we believe in helping folks.
All right. So thank you all so much for joining us today. But yeah, we want to just close with, it's fall, y'all. We had to do this one because I don't even think we told anyone where we are. We're in Texas. So I'm in Waco and Ken's down in Houston. And we've been having that conversation about that brief moment of like kind of a pause where, and finally we got some cooler weather here. But that kind of space where you have just a little breathing room before the holidays come. And we actually were saying like, okay, I'm starting to feel my heart kind of get a little bit faster here. But we are looking for, we just want to let people know that if you're interested or you need to have a conversation, we'd love to sit down, chat with you, listen to kind of what your intentions are. Because we know we've been doing video for a long time. And the more I talk about it, now I've been having a lot more conversations with people who are like, Roxanne, I think I see how that could be helpful for us. So if you are interested, just reach out to us. We'll send a follow-up email, and we'd love to see if there's a conversation, help you, even listening to you as you're talking. Sometimes just saying it out loud can be helpful. And so that process, we love to have that conversation, the plan, and then moving into the next steps.
Yeah, so grab that pumpkin spice latte, right? Everybody loves that right around now, right? It is November. It is fall, y'all. So yeah, let's connect. Let's have some coffee. Let's just have some let's nerd out a little bit. Where are my other video nerds at? Let's just connect and nerd out together. So yeah, just let us know if you want to connect to have a conversation. Maybe even proceed in making a plan and taking it to some action. We'd love to hear from you.
So I just want to thank you all for joining us sharing spending your hour here on National Distance Learning Week to kind of celebrate and to look at, it really is powerful technologies that we have out there. So I'm Roxanne Glauser, and this was Roxanne and Ken sharing with you from i2i Technologies. So hopefully we'll see you guys around.
Yep. Happy National Distance Learning Week. Welcome, Tammy. Bye, everybody. Welcome, Valerie. Look forward to seeing you too.